on, Karen, you got to smile at that. I know you're a Toronto Maple Leaf fan.
Good job, Councillor Munch.
Acting Mayor DePaula, I can confirm we are live streaming.
Okay. Welcome, members of the public, and welcome, council members, to this council public hearing, Wednesday, May 19th. I'll start the meeting by reading a public notice. Due to the efforts to contain the spread of COVID-19 and to protect all individuals, city facilities will not be open to the public to attend council and committee meetings until further notice. The public can observe meetings of council and committees by viewing the live stream of the open session part of these meetings, which can be accessed on the city's website at richmondhill.ca or on the city's YouTube page, linked from the city's homepage. So there's also a special public hearing notice. The public may submit written correspondence regarding agenda matters by email to clerks@richmondhill.ca. Written correspondence must be submitted by 12 p.m. on the day of the meeting, and comments submitted will be provided to all members of council, considered as public information and noted in the public record. The public may apply to appear as an electronic delegation by video conference or by telephone. Applications to appear as an electronic delegation must be submitted by 12 p.m. on the day of the meeting. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to hear comments regarding the proposed planning applications. Planning staff will first provide an overview and describe the application. A representative for the property owner or the applicant will then have the opportunity to speak, followed by individuals who register to appear as a delegation. Delegations will be called upon to speak in the order that they appear on the agenda. As a reminder to all delegations, please make sure your microphone is not muted when you begin speaking. Every registered delegation will be provided 5 minutes to speak. The clerk will announce when you have 1 minute left and when your time is up. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submission to the City of Richmond Hill in respect of a proposed official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, or a plan of subdivision or condominium, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of City Council to the local planning appeal tribunal and may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the local planning appeal tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. Okay, so having said all that, I need a motion to adopt the agenda. Councillor Silovitz, Councillor West, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay. Do any members of council have a disclosure of pecuniary interest? I see none. Okay.
I have one comment, if I may. Councillor Barrows just sent me a note that he is having a water problem, won't be able to make it today.
Okay, Councillor Barrows sends regrets. Okay, we have 2 items on our scheduled business. The first is a request for comments. It's an official plan and zoning bylaw amendment application by 2705785 Ontario Limited regarding 9675, 9697, 9699 Yonge Street. Okay, and from our planning department, we've got Leanne Penner is going to introduce this to us. Ms. Penner, go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Acting Mayor DePaula, members of council, and the public. The first public meeting tonight involves revised official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications to permit a high-density mixed-use residential commercial development on lands municipally known as 9675, 9697, and 9699 Yonge Street. Next slide, please. The subject lands are located on the east side of Yonge Street, north of Clarissa Drive, and have a total combined lot area of approximately 0.74 hectares or 1.83 acres. The landholding is comprised of contiguous parcels, which presently support an existing automobile service center and motor vehicle repair establishment that are to be demolished to facilitate the proposed development. Surrounding land uses include a neighborhood shopping center and high and medium density residential uses to the north, retail commercial uses to the south, high and low density residential uses to the east, and retail commercial and low density residential uses to the west. Next slide, please. Ownership of the lands changed to the current owners, 2705 785 Ontario Limited, in August 2019. Through these revised applications, the applicants are seeking approval of a high-density mixed-use residential commercial development comprised of 2 residential apartment buildings with heights of 19 stories respecting Tower A and 16 stories respecting Tower B that are to be connected by a 5-story podium and at-grade townhouse dwelling units with a combined total of 352 dwelling units. The proposal also includes an attached 2-story retail commercial podium along Yonge Street, which is to contain an Audi automobile sales dealership and related uses. Primary vehicular access to the site is proposed by way of a right-in, right-out driveway onto Yonge Street. Secondary access is proposed by a private driveway abutting the northern boundary of the subject lands and a connection via the property to the south of the subject lands. Next slide, please. The applicant's revised official plan amendment application seeks approval to increase the maximum density from 2.5 FSI to 4.35 FSI and to increase the maximum building height from 15 stories to 19 and 16 stories. The applicant's revised zoning bylaw amendment application seeks approval to rezone the subject lands to residential 10th density RM10 zone under bylaw 232568 as amended, with site-specific provisions to implement the development proposal. A major transit station area, referred to as MTSA 39, is centered at the newly constructed Bus Rapid Transit Station at the intersection of Yonge Street and Weldrick Road. It is noted that the subject lands are located approximately 400 meters walking distance from this new BRT station. In this regard, the subject lands are located within the boundaries of an MTSA as endorsed by Regional Council. Staff have circulated the applications to internal departments and external agencies for review and comment. The purpose of the report is to provide council and the public with an overview of the applicant's development proposal and has been structured for information purposes only, with the recommendation that all comments be referred back to staff for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Penner. And on behalf of the applicant, we have Lauren Campolongo from Malone Given Parsons.
Good afternoon, members of council. My name is Lauren Capolongo, and I'm a principal with Malone Given Parsons, and I am the land use planner to Dilawri Real Estate Group, Inc. With me this evening, I have 2 representatives from Dilawri. I have Mr. David Boots, who is the Vice President of Strategic Development, and Milton Lamb, and they will both be available after the presentation to answer any questions that you may have. I did provide a presentation to the clerk, so I'm wondering if they could put that up. That'd be wonderful. We can skip to the next slide, please. Next slide. As Leanne mentioned, there was an original application filed for these lands, and there was a public meeting held back in March 2019 for a high density development consisting of 2 towers with 18 and 16 stories in height with retail uses at grade. Dilawri purchased this property from the previous owner back in August 2019, and they've assumed the development approvals process and submitted revised applications for a high-rise mixed-use development consisting of 2 residential towers of 19 and 16 stories in heights. But the most fundamental change to the development is the proposed integration of a sort of a new format automobile dealership in the first 2 stories of the building fronting onto Yonge Street. And the integration of this dealership with residential uses is an exciting new concept that Dilawri is hoping to bring to fruition in Richmond Hill. Next slide, please. I'm going to skip over actually the next slide as well. If we can move to slide, just because Leanne did such a wonderful job of highlighting some of the site context as well as the planning policy. As Leanne did mention, the lands are designated they're designated regional mixed-use corridor in the city's official plan and have a density target of 2.5 FSI with maximum building heights of 15 stories. The applications before you tonight seek to increase the building heights to 18 stories and 19 stories and 16 stories respectively, and increase the FSI to 4.39 FSI. And just for note of council, all of the other policies in the official plan, this proposal does comply with. Next slide, please. This is the original concept plan that was before you back in March 2019 for the public meeting, which contemplated the 18-story and 16-story concept. Next slide. This is the revised concept plan that has been submitted recently. And we continue to propose a high-rise mixed-use development. The tower heights have been tweaked slightly with an increase in the building height for the Yonge Street Tower to 19 stories and no change in the building height for the tower closest to the rear at 16 stories. We continue to provide rooftop amenity space for the future residents of this development. And as I mentioned, the most fundamental shift is the integration of this automobile dealership in the first 2 stories of the building fronting onto Yonge Street. And what's unique about this concept is that all of the functions of a typical dealership will be internalized within a building. The showroom, the office component of the dealership will occupy the first 2 floors of the Yonge Street frontage. And the service function of the dealership will occur in dedicated space in the underground parking garage. There's also dedicated parking for the dealership staff and visitors, which is with a separate set of elevators that provides direct access to the showroom from the underground. And the introduction of this dealership will generate a minimum of 70 high-paying employment jobs on this section of the Yonge Street corridor. Next slide, please. This is just a side-by-side comparison of the original application with the current application that's before you tonight. As mentioned, there is a slight tweak in the building height for the tower closest to Yonge Street. We're bumping it up to 19 stories versus 18 stories, but the back building, Tower 2, remains unchanged at 16 stories. We have maintained a tower distance separation of 25 meters, which complies with the city's requirements. The commercial floor space has increased as a result of the integration of the dealership, which has pushed the density up to 4.36 FSI. Next slide. This is the ground floor plan, and it just gives you a better sense of how the uses are organized on the site. The portion in pink is dedicated to the dealership, and it's designed to be separate from the residential uses. As Leanne mentioned, access to the site is through a right in, right out on Yonge Street. Next slide. These are the conceptual building renderings. It shows you the view along Yonge Street as well as a view from the rear of the building looking southwest. We're going to be finalizing, revising, and providing more detail on these elevations as we move through a site plan application process. Next slide. One item I did want to highlight is the angular plane requirement. There is a requirement in the city's official plan to achieve a 45-degree angular plane. As you can see, that is represented through the blue line. The building actually achieves a 30-degree angular plane and conforms with the city's policies.
Fine.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Campolongo. Did you have any remarks to wrap up? Your 5 minutes is expired.
The next few slides actually just focus on the shadow studies, and overall I just wanted to note that the building is in compliance with the city's shadow study requirements and meets all of those guidelines.
Okay, and you'll be available to answer questions if asked. Okay.
Absolutely.
Very good. I believe we do have a delegation on this matter. I don't have the revised agenda in front of me, but there is a delegation. Mr. Clerk?
Mr. Mohammed, if you could please unmute.
Oh, there we are. Mr. Mohammed, go ahead. You have 5 minutes to address council.
Thank you. My name is Tahir Mohammed. I'm objecting to the proposed amendments for the Board of York Regional Council Condominium Condo Corporation WISE 688. This board represents owners and residents of 22 Clarissa Drive, the western building of a 2-building complex known as the Gibraltar, located at the east of the proposed development. At present, I'm the president of board of YRCC 688. In response to the previous request that was heard at a public meeting on March 20th, 2019, we submitted an objection and a petition of almost 100 signatories asking that the request to permit the construction of towers that were 38% and 25% higher than the maximum building height of 45 meters contained in the city development standards should be denied. Additionally, of great concern was the proposed increase of the maximum floor area ratio from the standard 2.5 to 3.99 and the impact increased traffic volumes may have on the area's road network. We are now concerned with the following new issues which have been explained in the submission previously. Firstly, the site coverage. The maximum floor area ratio was further increased to 4.35 or 74% higher than the current standards, suggesting that there will be too many activities and facilities proposed for a 3/4 hectare site. Congestion as well as traffic movements egressing the site will compromise safety on adjoining streets. Secondly, the building heights. Tower A of 19 stories is 40% higher than the maximum building height permitted in the RM10 zone. Tower B is 20% higher. On account of the separation distance, the tower's appropriate light views and privacy within the proposed developments would be adversely affected. And we trust that you would recognize the impact excessive heights to these towers will have on our building located to the southeast. Thirdly, traffic volumes and an unclear egress. Parking spaces were increased by 15%, suggesting that traffic volumes exiting the site will be further increased on the proposed future driveway adjacent to our property and onto Clarissa Drive, as well as on Church Street. These streets are already very busy and probably not designed for large volumes of traffic. Despite the introduction of traffic signals, we are also unsure about measures via adjacent private property and potentially future and existing private driveways identified but not detailed on the site plans. Fourthly, the proposed setback from the property boundaries. Minimum distances from the property lines are substantially reduced. With the increase in the maximum floor area, it appears that the facilities are being forced fit onto that site. Fifthly, is there an appropriate commercial utilization? While we welcome the quality of architecture that a prestigious automobile dealership could provide to the Yonge Street environment, we question the suitability of such a facility on a small site with restricted access and egress. The general area from around Elgin Mills to north of 19th and Yonge Street, for example, is ideal for automobile dealerships, and no wonder several of them are located here. Also, does this type of development really support users of public transit? Sixthly, housing densification. We fully appreciate the need for higher densification along the Yonge Street and in accordance with the York Regional official plan for urban areas. Also to justify recently implemented a future mass transit system, but due consideration should be given to the localized environment for each special case. There are other locations such as Yonge Street around Highway 7 that can easily support taller structures because of the surrounding properties, lower ground elevation, and proximity to existing or contemplated major transit hubs. On the positive side, we are pleased to see the inclusion of family-size residential 3-bedroom units in the proposal. We are, however, concerned about their affordability as required and the outdoor recreational space available for their occupants.
Okay, Mr. Mohammed, you'll have to wrap up now. Your time is up.
While similar concerns exist for the townhouse units, we appreciate the more desirable street frontage which will introduce, but it does not address the 45-degree projection consistent with city standards. Because of these factors, we are respectively, again, objecting to the proposed amendments to the official plan and zoning bylaw for this site. One quickly. We agree that these claims may be symptomatic of not in my backyard thinking, but they can be supported by facts well known to the competent urban planners employed by the city of Richmond Hill and our esteemed local councillors. We urge you, therefore, to permit such future developments obviously warranted within existing guidelines. These were
Thank you,
carefully developed.
Mr. Mohammed, thank you. Okay. We understand your remarks, and you, if there's questions from council for you, we understand you are representing the condominium corporation nearby, so as their president. So thank you very much for that. I believe that was the only registered delegation. So I'll turn it over to the ward councillor for her comments on this exciting project.
Thank you very much, Mr. Acting Mayor. And my thanks to the applicant for their presentation and to the time spent with myself with regards to this reapplication, and of course to Leanne and our planning staff who have been very helpful. Just before I start, I want to really thank my residents involved here who were very understanding about the fact that I could not hold the residents' meeting, which was going to be held last week because of my health. So I just want to really thank them. They've been so understanding and so supportive. And thank you to all who have sent me messages of support and kindness and encouragement. I can't tell you how much it means to me. Thank you so much. So here we are at CPM tonight. I have gone through this application with the applicant, and I've gone through it with our senior planner, Ms. Penna, and it generally complies with what I believe is expected now on Yonge Street. So while it may not conform to the parameters and the maximums that are within our in-place official plan, I have no doubt that as our new official plan comes to fruition next year, and the official plan for York Region, that there will be greater heights and densities that will be enshrined into our new official plans. With that said, the building heights here of 19 and 16, again, are pretty much acceptable to fronting onto Yonge Street. The higher building is on Yonge Street. We have buildings that have been applications that were submitted for buildings north of Harding on both sides. And all of those are buildings that are higher than, are 20 stories or higher than 20 stories. So there can be no doubt that this is what is going to be expected along this corridor. And should an application such as this be appealed to LPAT, I have no doubt that LPAT would agree to these heights and densities because they mirror what have already been approved. Also, not only does this site sit within the area of the Weldrick MTSA, it's also just south of the major MTSA, which is located at Major Mac and Yonge. So it is appropriately situated on the Yonge Street intensification corridor. And I agree with Mr. Mohammed. I like to see the inclusion of 3-bedroom units, very important for anybody living on the transit corridor. But I would like to ensure that the applicant continues to address the affordability aspect of this and how they are going to assess affordable units that must come to this application as well. I share the residents' concern, our Gibraltar complex residents' concern about how close the back building is to their property, that shadow will encroach on the tennis courts. So I ask that the applicant continue discussions with our planning department and take a look at perhaps bringing the footplate, making the footplate smaller, specifically on the eastern edge, so that the building is brought just a little bit closer towards its own property. I understand why they would feel that way. There's no specific stepping down into cascading or stepping down into the neighborhood area. I would like to have seen much more than that. So perhaps that in urban design can be taken a look at as well. I believe because we have a traffic light at May and Young already, the traffic infiltration and exfiltration shouldn't be overly burdened, which is what is always expected. I don't believe that there will be too much infiltration onto Church Street South and specifically onto Clarissa, because of the BRT, thank you. I'm almost finished, Mr. Acting Mayor. Because of the BRT along Yonge Street now, you can only turn right in and right out of Clarissa. So I share the residents' concerns, but I also would like the residents to understand that this is the type of application in buildings that we are going to be seeing all along the Yonge Street Intensification Corridor. And my last thing, if I may, with your indulgence, Mr. Acting Mayor, so I don't have to go to a second round, I am concerned about the Audi dealership there. I don't believe it belongs there, but I understand that the Delory Group is specifically involved with this kind of dealership building. So I want to voice my concerns there because I don't believe a car dealership belongs at this particular location on Yonge Street. Those are all my comments, and I would appreciate continuing contact from the applicant and of course from planning as we move forward with this process. Thank you very much.
Okay, then thank you, Councillor Silovitz. I understand a lot of ground to cover on 5 minutes. Thank you for those comments, and I assume you're going to move the staff recommendation. So all comments will come back to our staff, including those that are written and presented here today.
Thank you. Yes.
Someone want to second that motion to receive all comments and speak next? Councillor West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the delegate and to the applicant. So this is, I agree with Councillor Silovitz generally. I think that, this is the kind of general built form and height, frankly, that we're going to be expecting on Yonge Street. So I don't think I have, too much concern over that particular aspect of this development in and of itself. I'm a little bit concerned. I mean, tonight is the time that we're making comments. So my comment would be that I do feel that the density or the massiveness, not the density, the massiveness of this built structure is a little more than I wish that we could see here. And so from an urban design point of view, I would prefer to see something that's a little bit more, not as broad and wide and massive. And I think that from an architectural point of view, there surely must be a way to make the look of this a little bit more delicate. And I think, from a practical point of view, it would be really nice to be able to see something that has a little bit of permeability between the buildings. So instead of having that podium be so big and massive on the north side, it would be nice to see if there was some sort of a way for people to walk through to the north side. I'll leave that up to staff as a comment and to the architects to figure that out. The dealership is an interesting situation. This is not something that we're used to seeing, but I'm going to leave it up to our staff to do the analysis here to see how well that particular land use would fit into an area like this. I know that this council has gone through some thinking about dealerships in the last little while, and some of the research that I did during that time was that dealership models are changing. And, I'm not an expert on that by any stretch, but I think that this may be something that is more of a future version of what a car dealership could end up looking like. Audi's a great brand, and I think that, the look of the front of that building is quite nice. So I think I'll leave it up to staff to figure out the logistics of how that land use would fit into this particular aspect, because I think it could be done. The only other thing I would mention is and the delegate said this, with the increase in density like that, it's very important to have permeability, not just for cars, but for, pedestrians and other forms of transportation as well. I'm assuming that there is a plan for the overall area to be connecting some of these private laneways to make sense and efficient use of the transportation network that will evolve in this area over time. So I'm not going to ask that as a question because I fully assume that staff's on top of that, but I'll put that out as a question at this time. So anyway, that's all I've got, I think, for this evening. I think that, there are some details that need to be looked at. And in reading the staff report, I know that there is a lot of detail in this and a lot of questions and other details that will be looked at from this point on to any future point. So I think that's, that sounds fine to me. Anyway, I'm happy to second the motion and to refer all comments back to staff. Thanks, Mr. Acting Mayor.
Hey, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Munch.
Good day, everybody. I guess my concern here is how are we having this car life mix? I find the parking spots quite high, frankly, for a transit corridor. And I'm not sure I can support the application the way it is right now, because if we're going to be bringing the density to Yonge Street, we actually want to reduce traffic. And as the delegates have said that they're concerned about the infiltration and the work form, I would agree with that. I don't believe this is in line with the provincial guidelines and where we're going, and to get the investment responsibility for our subways and our transit corridors and our vibrancy of a walkable, livable area. And I think it will help their retail and our Yonge Street. Our Yonge Street is becoming very, very vibrant and is about to become very, very vibrant. We need to make a walkable, livable MU type. So I would say to you that I would expect the parking standard to be substantially lower. I think to expect 389 parking spots for 352 units is only going to bring in more cars to the area, is not promoting where it needs to be, is not supporting transit. And I would suggest out of line, given the amounts of investments we put in. And I'll say to you, I'll be a strong advocate and have been a strong advocate of that. Do not believe that cars should be going into neighborhoods and along that corridor. And it is so close to Yonge Street and the Major Mackenzie, where that vibrant village core should be. So I don't want that density. I don't want the traffic in that form. I would say to you, I'd much rather have a walkable form. So that'd be my comments out of the gate. I do like I understand we're driving everything to Yonge Street with our car dealerships, as was mentioned earlier by the other councillor. I'm frankly a little disappointed given that where that needs to be, but that's the direction I guess we're going towards. But it's going to be very, very hard with Yonge Street with that bus rapid transit going through there to have that traffic in and out. And I'm really concerned about the walkability and livability of that area, given this kind of mix. And if it was for the dealership, I could probably give a little bit more flexibility, but I'm not really seeing that unless it can be clarified in the next, maybe the next round or when they come back. That'd be my point. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Munch. Okay, I don't see any other hands to speak. So just briefly, I'd like to say that I agree with a lot of the comments that have been said, but I really think this is an exciting project, and I think this is going to be a really nice look going down Yonge Street to have a luxury car dealership. It will add some cachet to this area. I think that of all the different retail uses you could have, a luxury car dealership will be the lowest amount of in and out traffic. It's a showroom and a showcase, and I think it's gonna fit very well. And like the ward councillor said, this is going to be well below the standard or the new standard adopted in the 2021 official plan. Certainly the regional plan will be calling for higher heights and densities in there, and the province's centers and corridors mandated populations in transit areas, which this is a major transit station area identified by the region. There's just no question that this is about the lowest building that we're gonna, it's gonna come across our desk in one of these MTSAs on Yonge Street like this, with the size of this lot and everything else. The fact that they're well below the 45-degree angle, and it appears shadowing studies are all in conformity with what they should be. I think, well, the residents in the established neighborhood behind this building will have a better view of the skyline than other parts of Yonge Street. So I think it's exciting overall, this addition to the area. That's my comments, but I'm not going to prejudge what our staff will come back with when this comes to council. I'll wait and see what their analysis says, and I really hope that Councillor West's concerns are addressed with regards to the overall workings of the transportation network in this area, and the pedestrian ability to get around safely and comfortably. So those are my comments. We have a motion on the floor moved by Councillor Silovitz, seconded by Councillor West. All those in favor? Okay, any opposed? That carries unanimously, I believe. Okay. So the next item, 3.2, is a request for comments, official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications by 272-1854 Ontario Inc. regarding 45 Observatory Lane. Okay, so from our staff, it's Catherine Faria to introduce this to council. Go ahead, Ms. Faria.
Good evening, Acting Mayor DePaula, members of council, and the public. The second public meeting tonight involves applications for official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment to permit a mid-rise residential development on the lands municipally known as 45 Observatory Lane. Next slide, please. The subject lands are located on the south side of Observatory Lane, east of Yonge Street, and have a total lot area of approximately 0.567 hectares. The lands presently support a steel fabricating establishment and accessory office uses. The abutting land uses include existing rental apartment buildings to the west, Bridgeview Park to the south, industrial uses to the east, and Observatory Lane to the north. Within the broader context of the site, surrounding land uses include a range of built forms, including low, medium, and high density residential uses to the north and west, as well as existing industrial uses to the east of the subject lands. Next slide, please. Through these applications, the applicant is seeking approval for a mid-rise residential development comprised of 2 connected 8-story apartment buildings containing a total of 255 residential dwelling units on the land holdings. Vehicular access for the proposed development is contemplated from Observatory Lane, which is proposed to connect the street to a pickup and drop-off area, a loading area, visitor parking, and an underground parking facility for the proposed development. The lands are designated neighborhood within the city's official plan. Land uses permitted within the neighborhood designation include primarily low-density residential uses, in addition to various other uses subject to specific criteria as outlined in the plan. The lands are currently zoned Residential Multiple Family 4, RM4 zone, under Bylaw 57-88 as amended, which permits apartment dwellings on the lands. Next slide, please. The applicant's official plan amendment application seeks approval to implement site-specific exceptions to permit a maximum building height of 8 stories and to permit a maximum site density of 3.61 FSI on the subject lands. The applicant has also submitted a zoning bylaw amendment application to establish site-specific development standards within the current RM4 zone as outlined in the staff report to implement the development proposal. The purpose of the report is to provide council and the public with an overview of the applicant's development proposal and has been structured for information purposes only, with a recommendation that all comments be referred back to staff for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Faria. Okay, we have 4 items of correspondence on this issue and 2 delegations. The first delegation's on behalf of the applicant, Michael Bissett, from Boostfields, Inc. Go ahead, Mr. Bissett. You have 5 minutes to address council.
Good evening. Thank you for having me, council. My name is Michael Bissett. I'm a land use planner for Metropole, the applicant. Here, with the next slide, I'll just introduce the site and location. Subject site is located at 545 Observatory Lane, east of Yonge Street, south of Weldrick, west of the Metrolinx rail line. It's in close proximity to obviously existing transit along Yonge Street, as well as several parks and Hillcrest Mall, as can be seen on the diagram as you see here. The next slide. This is a zoomed in aerial. So the aerial photo shows the site outlined in red. It's an existing industrial use, which was a small scale steel manufacturing facility. Also, there's existing industrial and wholesale uses to the east, followed by the Metrolinx rail line to the east. And east of that is the Dunlop Observatory Lanes, east of the tracks, observatory lands. There is to the west, along Marshall Street, a 10 and 14-story residential apartment building currently abutting the site. And further west of that is the German Mills Creek. This site is not located within the floodplain of the creek, just for your information. North of the site are 2-story townhome blocks and followed by single detached homes on the north side of Observatory Lane. The site abuts Bridgeview Park to the south, which includes several playgrounds and splash pads. Bridgeview Park also turns around and goes up north, kind of along German Mills Creek. The current condition, as you can see in the aerial photo, is somewhat incompatible with its surrounding residential context and also existing parks context. The proposed 8-story building will revitalize the property from its current condition in a manner that is compatible to its surroundings. I'll describe that when I get into the drawings. Next slide. And I'll just breeze through this because this has already been gone through by the planner. This is the York Region official plan. It's within the urban area, obviously near Yonge Street regional corridor. Next slide. Richmond Hill official plan, as you can see here, it's proximate to Yonge Street in the intensification areas along Yonge Street, including the KD8 Carvel. And next slide. As mentioned, it's designated neighborhoods currently in the official plan. It allows for infill development, including apartment forms. The height does exceed the 3-story limit in the neighborhood in the official plan. However, as noted, there is an existing zoning permission, and existing zoning permits a 10-story apartment building, all of which is based in a former secondary plan, which was the Observatory Lane secondary plan from the 80s. And those permissions in terms of heights are still there, notwithstanding that the zoning is, we still need a rezoning. But that height, just as you'll see, is compatible with its surroundings in terms of providing for angular planes. Slide 7, or sorry, the next slide. This is the zoning. As was mentioned, it's an RM4, permits 10 stories, proposals for 8 stories, has a lower coverage, somewhat lower than the requirement. However, the density is higher. As you can see, the units per hectare permission was 99, and we're seeking 449 units per hectare. So primarily the reason for the zoning is in relation to the density and also setbacks. The next slide. Okay, this is a site plan, and the proposal, as I noted, would replace the existing industrial facility with an 8-story building, which would fit within a 45-degree angular plane taken from the north side of Observatory Lane, which is on the left side of your screen as Observatory Lane. As you can see, the site's quite deep. So the buildings would be oriented in a north-south fashion. North on this drawing would be to your left. The building has been oriented, I mean, the site is oriented, and obviously the design of the building is oriented so as not to face the townhouses directly to the north, and provide for adequate separation from the east and west towards the existing apartments, as well as potential future redevelopment of lands to the east. All parking will be below grade, and loading will be located away from the low-rise neighborhood, central to the site, as was noted by the planner in the presentation previous. The next slide.
1 minute.
Okay. This is just an east-west elevation, just indicating there is a link between the two components of the building, centrally located. And you can see there's articulated design with balconies. This is the east and west facades. The next slide. This is the north and south facades, indicating the facade which would face both the park to the south, as well as the townhomes or Observatory Lane to the north. And as you can see, that's the slender point of the design. So it's a slender facade. Next slide. This is a conceptual rendering, just to illustrate the architectural character of the building. It's quite conceptual, doesn't indicate all of the surroundings, but it just gives you a feel for what the building would look like in concept. Next slide. So the proposal includes 255 units ranging about 500,000 square feet in size, with a mix of indoor and outdoor amenity, a large amount of outdoor amenity space on site. There will be 280 vehicular parking spaces, so it's about 69 spaces short of the requirement, but there would be a 25 car share spaces provided on site, as well as a significant number of bike parking spaces. Next slide.
Time.
Yeah, you'll have to wrap it up.
Almost got there. Okay, here we go. This is my last slide. This is just to indicate, and it was asked for a block plan, just to indicate how the proposal would not preclude future development that could occur to the east. And so that was the intention, to show how this area would evolve from its industrial, existing incompatible uses to a more residential scenario in the future, and how this wouldn't preclude that from happening. And that's the primary purpose of that. And with that, I'll take any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you very much. Yep, we note that you're on standby if there are any questions. We have one member of the public that wants to address council on this application. It's registered to do so, Dr. Erica Bontovics. Dr. Bontovics, go ahead. You have 5 minutes. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Hi, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Thank you for giving me some time. I have some concerns and comments. My concern is that the population density of the area will be increased very much. If the building will include 255 units, that means 255 families. I quickly counted the number of dwellings in the adjacent area between German Mills Creek, Church Street South, Sunshine, and Observatory Lane. It is 269 buildings. So the number of families actually is going to double. So what are the plans for improving the infrastructure, including roads and other necessities for families, daycare, school in this area? We already have a problem going out on Observatory Lane. Whoever wants to turn south onto Yonge Street, there is a lineup. And since the building was built on the corner of Yonge and Observatory Lane, those people cannot even come out from their driveway to join the line. And from this area, existing single house and townhouse area, whoever wants to go south on Yonge, everybody comes onto Observatory Lane. So I am concerned. Another comment, it was interesting to see that in both presentation, the building showed as adjacent to parks, and which is not the case. From the aerial view, it's very clear that it's jammed up onto the existing building where people with assisted living live. They need peace and quiet. And to me, the city planners should consider locating this building into the middle of that whole area between the train tracks and the existing two buildings on Marshall Street, because otherwise the population densities go up and the livability, although it's still, this is considered walkable distance to Yonge Street, but it's sort of crammed in these two buildings. I personally don't like and do not support the area. I talked to several of my neighbors in the street on Moonlight Lane, and I don't think this is well thought out. So I would like to ask city planners to reconsider this application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bontovics, and we certainly note your comments and your objections and concerns. As we have also received 4 letters of correspondence from your neighbors, and I thank you. That was the extent of those registered to address council. And I'll turn it back to council and over to the ward councillor, Councillor Chan.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor, and I want to thank the delegate who make a very good points, and also the staff and the applicant's agent. And I do have to say that when one looks at, well, 8-story is not the same as this one before us, but also recognizing this is not on Yonge Street. In fact, from what we already see, this is a kind of longer, narrower block. So I want to stress for the delegate and anyone may be watching, tonight we're not making decision. So tonight is to receive comments. So in addition to, I mentioned, I concur with what the delegate concern is, that basically with the 255, we're increasing or doubling the number of residential family units in the block just north of it. And I also acknowledge about the challenge in terms of the traffic at the intersection of Yonge and Observatory Lane. Now, granted, this is a particular property and the project is within the distance that for the major transit station area. However, it's also noted that it has 280 parking spaces. And we look at that, and based on what is being presented, that all the access at this point in time would be only coming through the south side of Observatory Lane. And that's going to be a challenge with the way that as its current form is going to be adopted, if that's the case. I do have to say I share the concern about the letter that's written in terms of written form, a bill form, I should say. Actually, that was also shared by staff about the bill form itself, the transition, particularly to the residents in the north side of Observatory Lane, and the compatibility. Now, I know the shadow study has been done, although that might not be necessarily something we will see tonight. The other things I have to express concern is about the environmental aspect, because right next to the east side of this site is still an ongoing industrial site. And therefore, that's why we're seeing residents who write in mention about the dust, about the noise. I know this is not specific to this particular applicant, but nonetheless, those environmental factors would have to be considered very carefully in this site. And staff make a good comment. Any kind of planning for this block would have to be more comprehensive, taking into consideration of the adjacent site, which is industrial site, and also have to exclude a small portion of the site actually they're owned by the city. So I hope the applicant take note and really working with staff, and I look forward to having the opportunity to work and talk with them and also the residents to address those issues about the transition, about the issue about the bill form, and mention about the any concern about the environmental aspect and more comprehensive in terms of the planning and specifically how the road network in terms of gaining access to and from the building. And don't forget, there's also issue about the emergency access vehicle. And if you look at what's being presented now, all those access are only limited to that, not that wide for 245 units that's being proposed at the corner of, not at the corner, actually just on Observatory Lane. So I do have to say that, Mr. Chair, I do have concerns that many of them actually have been also mentioned report on a number of pages. The staff at this point in time are not satisfied or don't see it's comply with. And I think it's quite a bit of work to be done. So I look forward to hearing from the applicant and working with our staff, myself, and the residents, and come up with something that would be really good for the comprehensive development for this block. So I like to move the recommendation as in the staff report to all the comments received today and return to staff. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, someone want to second the comments coming back? Councillor Silovitz, and you wanted to speak. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Yes, I'll second that. Thank you, Councillor Chan. I don't have too much to say. My thanks to the resident for speaking so eloquently, and to the applicant and staff for their presentations. The only thing I would like to add here, well, there's two things. Firstly, I agree that there's going to be a lot of excess traffic on Observatory Lane, but I don't quite know that anything can be done about that because it is the only road that is available for in egress and ingress. So that in and of itself is a problem. There is a traffic light at Observatory Lane and Yonge Street, so I don't think there'll be too much infiltration into the eastern neighborhoods because I do believe people would use that traffic light there. My other concern is the built form and the urban design. It looks so institutional. I would really, it just looks like cell blocks. I'm sorry, I don't mean to disparage anybody, but it looks like cell blocks. And I think that if we don't want to be building apartment buildings that look like that, we would like to give them much prettier form. This building, the urban design of this, the conceptual design just doesn't meet that at all. I think there are ways that you can, I'm not an architect, but I do believe that there are ways that you could, that one could change the design to make it look just a little bit prettier. So those are my comments. Hopefully the applicant will take a look at that and the architects, and you can look at trying to fine grain that a little bit more. Even though it's tucked away there, I do believe that it requires a little bit more attention. Thank you very much, Mr. Acting Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Munch, you're next. Oh, okay. Councillor Munch.
Hey, everyone. First of all, I'd like to say, haven't seen an applicant like this where they come in December and here we are in May in public forum. I haven't seen anything with that kind of speed. And I want to commend everyone for doing that. Job well done on all parties. So thank you for everyone working together to bring this to our attention. I do appreciate that you're doing car share, and that was something that was missing in the last application. I find it interesting that this application is farther away from Yonge Street, yet they want to work on car share. So they do have made an effort, either through staff or through themselves, to put something to recognize the traffic into the area. Question I have is how is this area going to integrate with the DDO park? Can I ask you how that's going to happen down the road?
Mr. Galanis or Mr. Kwan? Commissioner Kwan?
Through you, Mr. Acting Mayor, there are plans to build a pedestrian overpass over the CN lines, but you could also gain access the pedestrian, I believe the pedestrian walkway at Hillsview. Sorry, I think it's Hillsview, will continue to function, but we want to ensure though that the DDO is integrated with the Yonge Street corridor in order to make it a broader citywide attraction.
Okay, so so going on that line there, is that DDO, it's a pedestrian walkway and the gateway to get into there isn't through this neighborhood. The gateway, if anybody was to drive to this area, would be someplace else. Because as was pointed out by a few others, we're building that area on Yonge Street and the density in that going forwards, and that destination park and hopefully be integrated linkages to other parks would be great. So what is the plan? Is there going to be any engagement where people can get into that pedestrian bridge with a traffic issue for people getting there? Because that's a concern for me.
Through you, Mr. Acting Mayor, the DDO Master Concept Plan contemplates the primary accesses from Bayview Avenue and 16th Avenue and a series of pedestrian walkways from the various surrounding parking areas. As I say, there will be some additional pedestrian access from Yonge Street. It will provide a secondary function in terms of larger vehicular traffic. As I say, it's really intended to promote the integration of the Yonge Street corridor and perhaps even the use of the transit systems in order to reach the DDO.
Yeah, so along that same line with regard to the affordability, the walk, I think it'd be great if you have a great park into the DDO park with this kind of area, with a walkable, livable by Yonge Street with Hillcrest Mall nearby and the transit, would be really, really fantastic. Again, concern, I applaud them for the ride share. I look at the 280 parking spots, of which 217 of the 255 units with 38. I mean, I'm going to say to you, this is really impressive from a traffic point of view for a walkable, livable, and a housing affordability into a park area along Yonge Street. This is going to be a highly sought after area, and all the residents in the area will be really excited, assuming they get their package together and it's a nice amenities. I think this could have it all. Beautiful neighborhood, inexpensive, families oriented, parks, walkable, transit oriented, shopping. Absolutely on the balance right now, the application looks much stronger than relative to the one just previous. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Munch. Councillor West?
Thank you. Just to add, I guess, to some of the things that were said so far tonight, I'm not offended by the size of this. I mean, I think it's a little unclear in the staff report about, whether this built form is allowed or should be allowed under either the official plan or the zoning bylaw. So I think that, I guess, needs to be examined by staff, and I know that they will do that. It just seems to me, though, that this piece of land is kind of an unusual piece of land. It looks like it's some sort of a remnant, of a use from another time. But I think it also provides an opportunity to do something really good. And I don't think this is what I would consider really good. There was a comment in the staff report that I think I interpreted that the staff is encouraging a more holistic look at how the entire site could be developed. And I think that's really what's missing. Further to what Councillor Silovitz was saying, actually, she put the words to what I guess I was struggling to figure out why I didn't really like the design, because it looks very institutional. And there's no need for that. I mean, there's got to be a better way to create something that doesn't look like a big block that just maximizes the area. I truly believe that we need to be holding this application and others to a better level of urban design, and I'm sure that could be done. And perhaps part of that could be done with a more of an eye to the possibility of what the other land uses adjoining this could also partner with this applicant to produce, either, you know, if it was all produced at one time or at some point in the future. But I think that really needs to be looked at, because right now, I don't think this is as good an urban design or an architectural design as what we would demand for something that's going to be right next to the DDO park and in the middle of a nice subdivision like what you have there. So I would hope that we would not settle for this and that we could, you know, hold it to a higher standard. But again, I think, you know, trying to say this on a positive note, I think there is an opportunity to do something interesting with this kind of interesting piece of land. And I just think at the moment, you know, we're not sucking all the juice out of the lemon. And I would like to see us explore different possibilities that could produce a better overall urban design. So those would be my comments. I think we're on the right track on this, but I don't think we're there yet. I think Councillor Chan said it well that you know, there's quite a bit of work to be done on this, and I would agree with that assessment. So thank you for the opportunity to speak, Mr. Acting Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor West. I don't see any other council members wishing to speak to this one, so I'll just say a little bit of history. I was the ward councillor back in the 90s and hoping and trying to find a way to convert this tiny industrial area that wasn't performing a positive employment function for Richmond Hill into a more you know, pleasant, compatible with the residential and parks that exist in the area. So I think a residential alternative here is preferable no matter what the built form. And I think the applicants today have just presented a concept drawing. I don't think that's ultimately what the building might look like. But the bottom line is the only thing you are going to see is the portion of this building that fronts onto Observatory Lane and maybe the back side of it from the park. So I would hope that the applicant would make great efforts to address the existing low-rise residential community in its facade at the front onto Observatory Lane. In terms of the transportation, I think, you know, this is a nice community. It's a nice pocket, you know, for a very urban center that Richmond Hill is going to be. They have a signalized access out to Yonge Street, full median divide, and there's, because of the railroad tracks, there's nobody going to be tunneling through this neighborhood. You've got a full signalized intersection on Yonge Street for access only to the residents that live there, and you know, that's who's going to be coming in and out of this area. And I think it will function well. It does now, and I think it will continue to, relative to some other places that are dealing with competing commuter traffic and whatnot. So you know, it's a great little part of Richmond Hill, like Councillor Munch said, and a residential use, I think, is more appropriate here. So I'll leave it at that. And we've got a motion on the floor to receive the comments back from today from Councillor Chan, seconded by Councillor Silovitz. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. Okay, thank you very much, Council. That concludes our business for this evening. Thank you to the members of the public that came out. Motion to adjourn from Councillor Chan and Councillor West. All in favor? Any opposed? Carries unanimously.